Okay, ready to dive in?
Let's do it.
All right, so today we're going back to ancient Rome, 73 BCE. Picture the Colosseum packed with thousands of people.
Uh-huh.
They're there to witness gladiatorial combat, the clash of swords, the thrill of victory, and the agony of defeat.
Right.
But this time, something extraordinary happens.
Oh.
A gladiator, Spartacus, doesn't just fight for survival in the arena. He starts a rebellion that shakes the Roman Republic to its very core.
Wow. Spartacus, huh? Now that's a name that echoes through history.
Yeah, he's more than just a gladiator. He's a brilliant military strategist, a charismatic leader.
Mm.
He unites a diverse group of people, many of them slaves, under a common cause: freedom.
That's really interesting. So it's not just about the spectacle of gladiatorial combat, but about the human struggle for freedom.
Exactly. It's a story that still resonates today, a story of courage, resilience, and defiance against overwhelming odds.
I can see why you want to do a deep dive on this. It's got all the elements of an epic story.
Before we get into the rebellion itself, let's explore what we know about Spartacus, the man behind the legend.
Okay, let's do it.
His origins are a bit murky, but we know he was Thracian.
Thracian, huh? That's a region known for its fierce warriors, right? Kind of where northern Greece and Bulgaria are today.
Exactly. So Spartacus already had a warrior spirit instilled in him from his background.
I see. So he comes from a culture that values strength and fighting spirit?
Right, but here's where things get even more interesting. There's speculation that he might have actually served as a Roman auxiliary soldier before being captured and sold into slavery.
Oh, wow. So he might have actually fought for Rome before being forced to fight against it. That's a pretty wild twist. Talk about irony.
Absolutely. It adds another layer to his story and might explain his later military successes.
It definitely makes you wonder about his mindset, how he went from potentially serving Rome to leading a rebellion against it.
Right. It speaks to the brutal realities of the Roman world and the complex circumstances that led to his uprising.
Okay, so we've got this Thracian warrior, potentially a former Roman soldier, who ends up a gladiator. What happens next?
Well, he's sent to the Ludus, a famous gladiatorial school in Capua.
Capua. Wasn't that like the gladiatorial capital of the Roman world, the place where it all began?
Exactly. A city known for its brutal arena where the spectacle of violence was taken to new heights. Just imagine the pressure cooker of the Ludus.
I can only imagine. These gladiators were trained to fight, to kill or be killed. It must have been a crucible that really forged Spartacus into the leader he would become.
Absolutely. The tension, the desperation, the constant threat of death.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to fathom what it must have been like.
No kidding. So how does Spartacus go from being just another gladiator in this brutal system to the leader of a massive rebellion? What was the tipping point?
It wasn't Spartacus alone. Sources suggest it was a group of about 70 to 200 gladiators.
Mm.
They included Thracians, like Spartacus and Gauls.
Oh, right, the Gauls. They weren't fully integrated into the Roman Empire at this point. They still had a strong sense of independence and resentment towards Rome, I bet.
Exactly. So you've got this mix of cultures and grievances, a real melting pot of discontent brewing within the Ludus. And then they hatch this daring escape plan.
An escape plan from the Ludus. That sounds incredibly risky. These places were like fortresses, weren't they?
They were heavily guarded, but desperation can make people do incredible things. They used whatever they could find: cleavers, spits, knives to overpower their guards.
Wow, a kitchen revolt turned full-blown rebellion. That's impressive. They actually managed to break out.
They did. And they even managed to defeat a small force of Roman soldiers sent to stop them right there in Capua.
Seriously. So right from the start, they showed they were a force to be reckoned with. They weren't just running, they were fighting back. But where could they go? I mean, they were escaped gladiators, considered less than human in Roman society. Where could they possibly find refuge?
They found it on Mount Vesuvius.
Vesuvius, the volcano. Why there?
It was a strategic choice. Vesuvius offered natural defenses. It was a perfect hideout. Plus, it was a powerful symbol.
A symbol. How so?
Think about it. A volcano, a force of nature, representing their own eruption against Roman oppression. It became a beacon of hope for those yearning for freedom.
I see. A symbol of defiance against the power of Rome. Very clever. But how did a handful of escaped gladiators turn into an army of thousands? How did they go from a desperate escape to a full-blown rebellion that threatened Rome itself?
Word of their defiance spread like wildfire. Runaway slaves, the discontented, the marginalized, they all flocked to Vesuvius. joining Spartacus's cause.
Wow, so it wasn't just about the gladiators anymore. It became a movement, a symbol of hope for anyone oppressed by Rome.
Exactly. And that's where Spartacus's true leadership qualities emerged. He wasn't just a skilled fighter. He was a visionary leader, a brilliant strategist, and a charismatic figure who inspired people from all walks of life to join his cause.
So he was able to unite all these different groups, these runaway slaves, these people from different cultures, and forge them into a cohesive fighting force. That's remarkable.
It is. And the Romans, well, they completely underestimated him.
They did. How so?
They saw the revolt as a minor nuisance, something they could easily squash.
Oh boy, that sounds like a classic blunder. Underestimating your opponent is never a good idea.
You're telling me.
Yeah.
Instead of sending their best legions, they sent poorly trained recruits, basically throwing raw manpower at a force fueled by desperation and a burning desire for freedom.
And what happened?
Well, Spartacus, drawing on his potential military experience, used guerrilla tactics, exploited the terrain, and outmaneuvered the Roman legions time and again. His victory shocked the Roman world and solidified his reputation as a serious threat.
So the Romans got a taste of their own medicine. They underestimated Spartacus and paid the price. What a story.
And it gets even better. Spartacus scores a victory so significant, so humiliating to Rome, that it sends shockwaves through the Republic.
Really? What did he do?
He managed to defeat not one, but both Roman consuls in a single battle.
Both consuls. Wow. That's like defeating the top generals of the Roman army.
Exactly. It was a symbolic blow, a moment that exposed the vulnerability of the seemingly invincible Roman Republic.
So what happens next? How does Rome respond to this unprecedented challenge to their authority?
Well, they finally realize they've got a real problem on their hands. They need someone who can crush this rebellion, someone ruthless and ambitious.
I'm on the edge of my seat here. Who do they turn to?
They turned to a man named Marcus Licinius Crassus.
Crassus, huh? Now there's a name I've heard before. Didn't he go on to become one of the most powerful men in Rome?
He did, and his clash with Spartacus played a pivotal role in his rise to power. But that's a story for our next deep dive.
Ooh, cliffhanger. I can't wait to hear what happens next.
We'll delve into Crassus's strategies, the final showdown, and the tragic fate of Spartacus's rebellion.
Sounds intense. I'm definitely tuning in for that. This whole story is just fascinating, a real testament to the enduring power of the human spirit and the fight for freedom, even against impossible odds.
Exactly. And it reminds us that history is full of surprises, of individuals who challenge the status quo and force us to rethink our assumptions about the past.
Well said. I'm already looking forward to the next part of this deep dive. You've definitely piqued my curiosity.
Glad to hear it. We'll see you next time for part 2 of our exploration of Spartacus.
Crassus was a fascinating guy, really. Like, on the one hand, he was one of the wealthiest men in Rome, a shrewd politician, too, but he was also ruthless, a real hardliner, and a brilliant general, no doubt.
So he was pretty ambitious. Seems like he was the kind of guy who would see this rebellion as an opportunity, not just a problem.
Oh, absolutely. Crassus, he wasn't just handed this command, he actually wanted it. He was eager to prove himself, boost his own power and prestige. And what better way to do that than by crushing a massive slave rebellion that had already humiliated Roman forces?
Makes sense. He saw this as his chance to become a hero, the savior of Rome, and maybe even position himself to challenge the existing power structure. I mean, who knows? Maybe even become consul himself someday.
Right. It was a calculated move. He knew the risks, but he also knew the potential rewards. Crushing Spartacus wouldn't just be a military victory. It would be a political triumph.
It's all about power, isn't it? But before we get into Crassus's strategies and all that, maybe we should step back for a second. Look at the bigger picture.
Right.
What was going on in the Roman Republic at this time? The late 1st century BCE. What was the social and political landscape like? What were the factors that contributed to the rise of someone like Spartacus in the first place?
Yeah, good point. You can't just look at Spartacus in isolation. You have to understand the context, right? And the Latin Republic, well, it was a time of tremendous upheaval. Rome had just come out of a series of really nasty civil wars, you see. These wars, they weakened the traditional power structures, left the society pretty fractured.
So there were already cracks in the foundation, so to speak, even before Spartacus came along.
Definitely. The old social order, it was breaking down. You had this huge gap between the super rich and the poor, and lots of resentment building up. Plus, slavery, which we've already talked about, was a fundamental part of the Roman economy. It was everywhere. But it was also a source of constant anxiety for the ruling class. They knew they were sitting on a powder keg, so to speak.
And Spartacus, With his defiance of Roman authority, he kind of lit the fuse. Wow.
He was the spark that ignited the powder keg. He showed that Roman power wasn't absolute, that even slaves could rise up and challenge the established order. When people saw him and his followers winning these incredible victories against the legions, it gave them hope. It made them believe that change was possible.
He became a symbol of resistance, a figure who embodied the struggle against oppression. And it wasn't just about brute force. We've talked about his military skills, his strategic brilliance. He knew how to use the terrain to his advantage, how to motivate his troops. He was a natural leader.
Yeah, he was more than just a fighter. He was a brilliant tactician, a charismatic figure who could rally people to his cause. And that's what made him so dangerous to the Roman elite. He was outsmarting them, outmaneuvering them, and he was doing it with an army of slaves, people who were supposed to be at the bottom of the social hierarchy.
It must have been terrifying for the Roman senators to see their world turned upside down like that, to see their power challenged by those they had so long oppressed.
Oh, it was a total nightmare for them. It made them question everything they believed in, everything they had built their society on. It exposed the inherent contradictions of their world, the reliance on slave labor while simultaneously fearing the very people they enslaved. And the fact that it took them years, and the intervention of Crassus with all his wealth and influence, to finally crush the rebellion, well, it just shows how serious a threat Spartacus posed.
Right, it wasn't some small-scale uprising. This was a full-blown existential crisis for the Roman Republic. It forced them to confront some really uncomfortable truths about themselves.
It was a wake-up call, but one that they ultimately tried to silence with brute force. But let's get back to Crassus. We talked about his ambition, his ruthlessness. How does he actually go about crushing the slave army that had already defeated multiple Roman legions? What's his strategy?
That's the big question, right? How do you defeat a force like that, a force driven by desperation and a yearning for freedom?
Well, Crassus, he understood that it wasn't just about military might. He knew that to win, he had to break the spirit of the rebellion, he had to instill fear, crush their hopes, and he was willing to use any means necessary to achieve that.
So he was going for total psychological warfare.
Oh, yeah. Terror was his weapon. He wanted to make an example of the rebels, a gruesome example that would deter future uprisings, and tragically he succeeded. But it left a dark stain on his legacy, and on Roman history in general.
This is where the story takes a dark turn, right?
Yeah.
What happens to Spartacus and his followers?
Well, Spartacus and his army, they'd had some setbacks. They were trapped in southern Italy, no supplies, no escape routes, and they were surrounded by Crassus's legions.
No way out.
Nope. The final battle, it was brutal. A desperate last stand against overwhelming odds. Spartacus' accounts differ a bit, but most agree. He fought bravely, even after he was wounded. But his body was never found.
What? They never found his body?
Nope. Adds to the mystery, doesn't it? Some say he died fighting, surrounded by Romans. Others, they claim he fell, badly wounded, but his followers, they took his body. Didn't want the Romans to desecrate it. We'll never know for sure. But his death, it marked the end of the rebellion. The dream of freedom. Crushed.
A tragic end to a story that had offered so much hope. But Crassus, he wasn't done yet, right? He had to make his point, send a message that would echo through the ages.
Right. He wanted to make sure that no one would ever forget what happened to those who dared to defy Rome. So he ordered the crucifixion of 6,000 captured slaves along the Appian Way.
Crucifixion. Along the Appian Way, the road to Rome. That's horrific.
It was meant to be horrific, a spectacle of cruelty. Imagine that, traveling along the Appian Way 120 miles and seeing thousands of crucified bodies. A stark reminder of Roman power and the price of rebellion.
It's hard to imagine the level of brutality.
Yeah.
But doesn't it also show how scared the Romans were? I mean, if they had to resort to something that extreme, they must have been really worried about future uprisings.
Exactly. The Spartacus revolt, it exposed the deep-seated anxieties of Roman society. They were terrified of slave uprisings, and the fact that they had to go to such lengths to suppress it, well, it shows just how fragile their system really was, how afraid they were of the people they had enslaved.
So it's more than just a story of a slave revolt, right?
Yeah.
It's a story about power, fear, and the contradictions at the heart of Roman society.
Yeah, it's a story that's still relevant today. It shows how power often relies on violence and fear to maintain control, and how those who are oppressed can rise up and challenge that power, even if the odds are stacked against them.
So we've covered Spartacus' origins, his rise to leadership, his incredible victories against the Romans, and the tragic end of his rebellion. But what can we learn from all of this? What really stands out to you about this chapter of Roman history?
For me, it's the enduring power of hope, even when facing impossible odds. Spartacus and his followers, they weren't just fighting to survive, they were fighting for something bigger, something more meaningful: freedom, dignity, a chance to live a life free from oppression. And even though they were defeated, their story continues to inspire people. It shows that the human spirit can endure even the most brutal circumstances, and that the desire for freedom is a powerful force that can unite people across cultural and social divides.
It's a story about the fight for a better world, a world where all people are treated with dignity and respect. And it makes you wonder, what if Spartacus had chosen a different path? What if, after defeating the consuls, he had marched on Rome itself? Could he have changed the course of history?
Ooh, that's a great question. It's impossible to know, but it's fun to speculate. What if Spartacus, emboldened by his victories, had decided to strike at the heart of the Roman Republic? Could he have toppled the empire? Would Rome have fallen to a former gladiator and his army of slaves?
It's mind-blowing to think about the possibilities. It really makes you appreciate how individual choices can have a ripple effect throughout history. But even though we can't know what might have happened, Spartacus's story remains a powerful reminder that even the mightiest empires are vulnerable, and that the fight for freedom is a fight worth fighting, no matter the odds.
Absolutely. Spartacus's story is a story about the human spirit, about the desire for a better world, and about the power of hope, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. But there's one thing that's always bugged me about this whole story. After defeating the consuls, Spartacus had a clear path north. He could have led his followers over the Alps to freedom beyond the reach of Rome.
Yeah, that's always been a bit of a mystery. Why didn't he take that opportunity? Was it a mistake? Or is something else going on?
Historians, they've been debating this for centuries. Some, they think Spartacus, maybe he got a little too confident after all those victories, underestimated how hard it would be to cross the Alps, especially with so many people. Others, they suggest maybe he had bigger ambitions. He didn't just want to escape, he wanted to liberate all of Italy, create a new society free from Roman rule.
So maybe he was driven by a vision that went beyond personal survival, even beyond the freedom of his immediate followers. He wanted to fundamentally change the world.
It's possible, and you can't forget about his followers either. Maybe some of them didn't want to leave their homes. Maybe they wanted to keep raiding the Roman countryside. Or maybe they shared Spartacus's grand vision. Who knows? It was probably a mix of things that led to his decision.
It's interesting to think about the dynamics within the rebellion, how all those different voices and perspectives might have influenced Spartacus's choices. But whatever his reasons, that decision to turn back from the Alps, it was a turning point. It marked the beginning of the end.
Yeah, it shifted the whole dynamic, from a campaign of liberation to a desperate struggle for survival. It's a reminder that sometimes even the best leaders make mistakes, and that those mistakes can have devastating consequences.
It really makes you wonder what might have been. If Spartacus had crossed the Alps, would he have faded into obscurity? Or would he have become a legend, the liberator of slaves, the man who brought down the Roman Republic?
Imagine that. Spartacus establishing a free state somewhere north of the Alps, a haven for escaped slaves and refugees, a symbol of hope for the oppressed throughout the Roman world. Who knows? It might have changed the course of Western civilization.
It's mind-blowing to think about the possibilities. But even though we'll never know what might have been, Spartacus's legacy lives on. He's a symbol of resistance, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, the human spirit can endure.
He's a reminder that the fight for freedom is a fight worth fighting, no matter how impossible it may seem. But let's not forget, Spartacus's rebellion didn't just inspire people, it also had a real impact on Roman society.
Right, his actions had consequences. Even though he was defeated, he forced the Romans to confront the issue of slavery in a way they never had before.
Exactly. The Spartacus Revolt, it sent shockwaves through the Roman world. It exposed the vulnerabilities of their system, the inherent instability of a society built on slave labor. And it made the ruling class realize that they couldn't just ignore the problem anymore.
So in a way, Spartacus's rebellion, even though it failed, planted the seeds for change.
I think so. His defiance, the scale of the rebellion, it made it impossible for the Roman elite to sweep the issue of slavery under the rug. It became a major political issue, a subject of debate in the Senate and among the people. And while it would take centuries for slavery to be abolished in Rome, Spartacus's rebellion was a catalyst. It forced them to start grappling with the moral and social implications of their system.
It's an important reminder that even when movements for social change don't achieve their immediate goals, they can have a ripple effect, a lasting impact on the course of history. Spartacus's rebellion, it may have been crushed, but it left a mark on the Roman psyche, a mark that would eventually contribute to the downfall of the very system he fought against.
It's a great example of how, even in defeat, the struggle for justice can plant the seeds for a better future. But, as we've been discussing Spartacus and his legacy, we've been relying on these Roman sources, these historians writing centuries after the events.
Right, Plutarch, Appian, those guys.
Exactly. But how reliable are they, really? Can we trust their accounts? And is there anything in those accounts that might surprise us that challenges our traditional view of Spartacus?
It's a good question to ask. We're dealing with history here, not just stories.
Mhm.
And sources, they can be tricky. So let's dive into that in our next part.
Yeah, it's important to remember that when we talk about Spartacus, we're relying mainly on Roman historians.
Right, okay.
Guys like Plutarch, Appian. They were writing centuries after the rebellion happened. And, they were writing for a Roman audience.
Right, so they had their own perspective, their own biases.
Exactly. They were trying to shape the narrative, present Spartacus in a way that fit their own worldview.
So we're not getting the full story.
We're getting a Roman interpretation of the story. And, Romans, they valued order, stability.
Yeah.
They saw Spartacus as a threat to all of that.
So they probably downplayed his achievements, made him seem less dangerous.
Probably. They might have emphasized his brutality, his violence.
Justify their own actions, right? Make it seem like they had to crush the rebellion to save Rome.
Exactly. But, even with those biases, those Roman accounts, they're still valuable.
How so?
They give us insights into how the Romans thought, how they saw the world.
Yeah, I guess you have to read between the lines, try to understand the context.
Right. And sometimes you find little details that challenge the traditional narrative.
Oh, like what?
Well, some sources, they suggest that Spartacus, he wasn't always gung-ho about fighting Rome.
Really? He wasn't.
Yeah, some accounts hint that he actually tried to negotiate with the Romans at one point.
Negotiate. What was he hoping to achieve?
Maybe safe passage for his followers, a chance to return to their homelands.
Wow. So he wasn't just this bloodthirsty rival hell-bent on destroying Rome.
It's possible. Maybe he was more pragmatic than we give him credit for. Maybe he was willing to compromise, if it meant saving lives.
That's a very different image of Spartacus than the one we usually get. It makes him seem more human, more relatable.
Right. It reminds us that history is rarely black and white. These were real people with complex motivations, and we shouldn't oversimplify their stories.
So what do you think? Was Spartacus a freedom fighter? A rebel leader? Or something else entirely?
I think he was all of those things, probably, and more. He was a product of his time, shaped by the circumstances he found himself in. But he was also an individual, a man who made choices, who took risks, who fought for what he believed in.
And in doing so, he left a mark on history that continues to inspire us today.
Exactly. His story reminds us that even the most oppressed can rise up and challenge the status quo, and that even in defeat, the fight for freedom can have a lasting impact. Spartacus, he may not have achieved all of his goals, but he showed the world what's possible when you dare to fight for what you believe in.
And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into the world of Spartacus. We've covered his origins, his incredible victories, his tragic defeat, and the legacy he left behind. And even though his rebellion was ultimately crushed, his story continues to resonate with us today, reminding us of the power of hope, the importance of resistance, and the enduring human desire for freedom.
And remember, this is just the beginning. There's so much more to discover about the ancient world, about the people and events that shaped our present. So keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep into the past.
And if you want to join us on those explorations, make sure you subscribe to The Deep Dive wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back soon with another fascinating deep dive into history. Until then, keep those minds engaged and keep seeking out the hidden stories that connect us to the past.